So today we're going to be reading from They Call It the City of Angels. And this book is the first book by J.A.TRILIEGI, yours truly, the author. And this book arrived out of some amount of necessity. The Bureau of Arts and Culture is a summer online magazine, had a window in the summertime. It was a seasonal publication. And we didn't have much going on in the summertime, and I decided to create a new fiction department by writing a chapter a day, every day, Monday through Friday, every August, while we were launching our online magazine. Now, it's the first time it's appeared in print. It's a lovely new edition. I'm quite proud of it. We've designed this, our art department, look at that, it's beautiful. Designed this first edition. We printed about 500 of these, and now we're printing 5,000 of these that will arrive in Los Angeles in 2026 for our annual event and to celebrate our publishing company, the Bureau of Arts and Culture. And today we're going to be reading from a middle section. This is a preferred chapter by T.C.BOYLE, the new fiction writer, quite famous for writing The Tortilla Curtain and other iconic novels throughout the 1980s and the 1990s. He writes to this day, and you can find his work in The New Yorker, and short stories, novels, all new fiction. And we were interviewing him in the magazine and got to know him. And we interviewed Luis Valdez, the author of Zoot Suit, and then I started interviewing some pretty other serious authors, such as, and painters and photographers, the best in the industry. So Train Spotting, I remember Irvine Welsh. And between Irvine Welsh and T.C.BOYLE and Luis Valdez, I came up with this book called They Call It the City of Angels. And so this is a chapter called Breakfast. This was a chapter that was preferred by Professor Boyle. The year after the riots, life in Los Angeles continued. People went to work, children were born. Time kept ticking, and the story never ended. For those in the hearts of the story, for those who were touched by the event, for those who lost and hurt and got burned, life would never be the same. An event that was your life, your experience, your history was being told by newscasters, mainstream publications, and radio disc jockeys who knew nothing about what it was really like and never would know. The day after the riots, a child awoke, poured a bowl of cornflakes, and watched cartoons on the television. The commercials in between told the child that when the milk was poured into the bowl, that it would snap, crackle, and pop. The child looked around the room, looked around the house, looked around the streets, and noticed that everything had snapped, crackled, and popped. The plastic had melted, the glass had warped, the wires lay open, exposing copper, lead, and silver. The perfect square box was now imperfect. The corners were entirely melted off. The handle that changed the channels had broken, and someone had attached a small vice grip in its place. The smell of burnt wood, ash, and oil permeated the air. Helicopters, sirens, and flashing lights became the norm. The curtains frayed at the edges, and all along the sides been stained by fire, air, earth, and water, the most basic of elements utilized in a fashion that created destruction instead of construction. The rug was soaked and laden with tiny bits of broken glass, ember, and grease stains. Smoke of all color and size wafted through the windows. Angry footsteps inhabited the ceiling, the hallways, and alleys. A toy fire truck that lay in the backyard for years was now replaced with a real fire truck that roared incessantly past its house at all hours of the night and day. Police car sirens and lights engaged 24 hours a day. Soldiers from the Army Reserves of the United States of America in camouflage standing on every corner. An entire world that snapped, crackled, and popped, and life went on. Houses went up for sale. Lots stood empty. Ashes piled up. Businesses were abandoned. Families were broken. Dreams were deferred. 3 strikes were established by the law, and people went to prison for stealing a pizza, a pair of shoes, a case of toilet paper. Men and women in all manner, in all shapes, in all colors, in all sizes broke, screaming through the streets, why? But even a child knows that if you want to learn algebra, you don't ask why. You simply work on the equation by learning the rules to the diagram. In geometry and trigonometry, there was no time to ask why. Even beer commercials directed the child to not ask why. And shoe companies reinforced that ideology by telling the child to just do it. So the child did. Empty slogans had manipulated the population for hundreds of years. And so the population, in its desperation, in its pain, and in its agony, and in its defiance, invented some empty slogans of its own. And then quite suddenly, those slogans were inhabited. Not so empty after all. This was not a politician with a team of advisors. This was not a police chief with a speechwriter. This was not a corporation with a dozen brilliant ad executives working on a new account. This was the motherfucking public. These were the real people. This was a real event. This was the city of a child who ate cornflakes while watching television every morning before school. And when its family, and when its friends, and when its neighbors, and when its city began chanting the empty slogans that rang through the city like a bell on Sunday, this child inhabited that slogan. No justice, N-O justice / N-O peace. No justice, K-N-O-W justice / K-N-O-W peace. Dragnet, and One Atom 12, and Policewoman, and Beretta, and Starsky and Hutch, and Chips, and The $1 Million Man, and The Bionic Woman, to quote a popular phrase in poetry, will not seem so damn relevant because the revolution will not be televised, and yet it was televised after all. The transmission of images was blasted across the city in the earliest hours of the event. The Parker Center flashpoint had ignited hotspots all along the vertical and lateral thoroughfares throughout the cities of angels in a giant grid that only those flying in airplanes and helicopters could view. With the exception of those multitude natural forces of life known as the animals, who watched in glee as the humans failed once again at their own game, a game of self-destruction, an experiment of too many mice in a maze called Los Angeles. Hawks circled overhead. Crows cawed. Seagulls glanced. Thrashers, blue jays, sparrows, woodpeckers, pigeons, hummingbirds, and all manner of birds flew overhead. Bees turned to their hives. Butterflies nestled under branches. Spiders strengthened their webs. Ants collected bits of this and that. Squirrels climbed palm trees to get a better view. Coyotes howled through the hills. Deer looked on pensively. Mountain lions patiently waited. Possums stopped playing dead and walked along the tops of fences. A family of bears escaped from the zoo. An elephant stepped on its trainer in a parking lot downtown. Snakes slithered to higher ground. Raccoons sent some easy pickings on the horizon. And all the while, domesticated dogs and cats sat with their owners watching television. The first time it rained after the riot, an inordinate amount of chemicals spewed through the streets into the gutters, down the sewers, along the pipelines, and onto the ocean. Formaldehyde, asbestos, concrete, plastic, tar, asphalt, rubber, fiberglass, aluminum, glass, lead, resin, stucco, lime, and drywall. The entire contents of dozens of 99-cent stores, which included bleach, roach killer, hairspray, Comet, Windex, baking soda, nylon, air freshener, butane, high fructose, corn syrup, polyester, Lysol, both the regular scent and the new and exciting pine flavor, all rolled into one giant blob of city sludge and plopped itself into the intestines of the City of Angels, rolling through the LA River and dumping itself directly into the sea. Bluefin tuna, albacore, barracuda, lobster, sea bass, and even mackerel were nowhere to be seen. There were no shark attacks to worry about. Sharks were too smart to swim in waters infested by chemicals of that variety. Within their very organism, they have a built-in mechanism that can detect 1/10,000th of an ingredient in the water from miles away. This device was originally evolved, no doubt, for survival in search of something to consume. But due to the stupidity of the human race, the callous nature of the corporations, the short-sighted views of the now angry populace, this device was used to avoid certain areas, and avoid it they did. The chemicals that trickled down through the ashes, through the soot, through the smoke, and through the tears had accidentally informed the organism, transformed the organism, reformed the organism, and the child, who had seemed all along and knew all along that all was not well, would never ever be the same again, nor would the place they call the City of Angels. The little plastic box that had for decades transmitted ideas still worked. The device that transferred images, sound, and motion on a regular basis continued to do so. Tony the Tiger exclaimed to the child that the food it was eating, the contents it was consuming, this simple little flakes of corn in all manner of speaking, the description could be defined in a two-word phrase that was simple and easy to remember. They're great. The big rabbit with the floppy ears was told time and time again that he was indeed a silly rabbit and that tricks are for kids. The Frito Bandito, Captain Crunch, Count Chocula, and a Lucky Charm with a shamrock were all present, representing an old school variety of corn paste, flour, sugar, and salt added, preservatives, in some cases food coloring, that sometimes cause cancer, with a simple reminder that if you ever ended up in prison, you would indeed have a chance to choose a cereal that represented something familiar to your general genetic makeup. And of course, there was the award-winning commercial that had Mikey and his brothers representing a product that somehow encompassed the child's entire existence by calling itself life. He won't eat it, his brother exclaims as they put a bowl of blocked wheat style cereal in front of the freckle-faced child. He hates everything. Then, quite suddenly, the boy begins to shovel the wheat blocks into his mouth as his brother excitedly exclaims, "Hey, Mikey, he likes it." For those with simpler tastes, you had Aunt Jemima and or Quaker Oats, in case you ever forgot who founded this country and what your position in the hierarchy was to begin with. Yes, the little box in the corner with the wire in the wall and the antenna on the roof still worked. And the child watched it. The picture was not as clear. The colors not as crisp. The audio was warped. The depth was foggy. The vertical and lateral lines often separated, but the endless trail of information, disinformation, and programming continued on. It taught the child, and eventually the child had learned to transmit its own programs. The child, and eventually learned to transmit its own programs, and its family and its neighbors and its city were all so busy programming they had no time to wonder just who exactly was actually eating the giant bowl of cereal that they were all now living in. The entire city snapped. It crackled. And it popped. Surely, someone was bound to eat it. They call it the City of Angels, chapter entitled Breakfast. honorable mention from Thomas T.C.BOYLE from the fabulous University of Southern California's English department, where Thomas Boyle said particularly of that chapter and his ecological consciousness that he liked the shifts in the point of view and thought it had nice sleight of hand. And thank you to Professor Boyle and the University of Southern California for that good write-up for my first novel. They call it The City of Angels, a tribute to Los Angeles. And this is an interesting book because it defies category. For some characters, such as Junior, it's an action movie. And for some characters, such as Jordan, it's a romance. For some characters, such as Ryan and his father and his family, it becomes a family novel. Some people are looking for their father. Some people are looking for their son or daughter. It really is a looking for kind of book. This is the 500 edition that arrived in softcover, hardcover, and a special black linen edition. And we are announcing through the reading today that 5,000 editions will arrive for 2026 to celebrate the Bureau of Arts and Culture at its publishing house, and the author, yours truly, J.A.TRILIEGI. And thank you for listening. You can find some of our channels having to do with photography and fine art on YouTube and throughout Google sites that were created originally online over a decade ago. They still serve a purpose, and they call it the City of Angels, has its own website. They call it cityofangels.blogspot.com. That is, one more time, the title of the book. They call it the City of Angels.blogspot.com. And that is a website that shows you how to actually write a book and how this book was written. A chapter a day online, 3 years in a row. And thank you to these authors: Ray Bradbury, Carol Oates, Joyce Carol Oates, Oscar Uellos, Richard Rousseau, E.L. Doctorow, Norman Mailer, Chester Himes, Harry Cruz, Thomas Berger, Raymond Carver, Jane Hamilton, Alice Walker, Luis Valdez, William Kennedy, Arthur Miller, Victor Hugo, Hunter S. Thompson, Black Elk, Bob Dylan, Mick and Keith of the Rolling Stones, Sir Paul McCartney and the Beatles, Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, due to a series of reasons locally and also professionally. These authors do speak to the style and the interest of this book and of this book with those authors in particular. Thank you for listening. This is J.A.TRILIEGI, the voice of the author in California, October of 2025, reading the chapter entitled Breakfast. This is an 18-minute and 30-second recording. 20, 21, 22, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, out.